You're listening to Parasearch Radio. News, views and reviews from the world of the paranormal from across the UK and beyond. Find us on Facebook, Twitter and the World Wide Web. The views and opinions expressed by presenters and guests are their own and do not necessarily reflect the official policy or position of Parasearch Radio or their affiliates and sponsors. Listener discretion is advised.
Welcome to Haunted Histories with your host Penny G. Morgan, right here on Parasearch UK Radio.
And good evening, everybody. I hope you are all well on this Wednesday evening. It's Haunted Histories night, isn't it? What else do you do on a Wednesday at 9 o'clock or whenever it is you choose to listen to this podcast brought to you by myself, the one, the only Penny G. Morgan. Well, it's been a bit of a quiet week, really. I've not done any investigating for the last couple of weeks. After 2 weekends on the trot of investigating, I thought I'd give myself some time off and spend time, catching up with the boring stuff, like the day job stuff and housework and all that great things that... Still haven't found the fairies that do that for me. How rude. How rude! But yeah, there's not a lot been going on. Been chatting to my wonderful friends at the Paranormal Sisters about some future projects we've possibly got going on. And don't forget, they've got a charity event at the Village on the 8th of June for the Paranormal Charity Warriors, where you can help raise money for Joe, the charity, and lipodystrophy and all those wonderful things. So do make sure, if you're available that day and you want to go along, have a look at the Paranormal Charity Warriors page. But on that note, I'm going to be talking tonight to someone who I would class as a good friend of mine. I was lucky enough to meet him for the first time last November, although his name and reputation did precede him. But that could be because he's as tall as the sky. But he's on the other end of the phone right now. It's the lovely Mr. Barrie John.
Hello. How are you?
Hello. You are as tall as the sky.
I love the way you say that. Yeah, as tall as the sky. Yeah.
Tall as the sky. Well, you are. You are.
I'm 6'5".
Yeah, and when you're 5'2", that's as tall as the sky. It is. It is, Barrie. Nobody warned me how tall you were before I met you, and yeah, tall as the sky. But then again, your mum was tall, wasn't she?
Yeah. All the family was tall. Yeah. Mum was just under 6 foot.
Wow.
So, and all Mum's family were very, very tall. This is where there's a huge difference in my family. All Dad's side were very short and little, and Mum's side were all very tall. Yeah.
Oh, wow.
Yeah.
So your dad wasn't tall as well?
No. My mum was... Well, my mum and dad were probably similarish sort of heights, but
right.
All Dad's family are all little short people, I'm afraid.
What, short or sort of just short compared to you?
Well, probably you short, I'd have said.
Really? Poor things.
Yeah, really weird, isn't it?
It's embarrassing when you have to get a child to reach stuff for you because you can't reach it yourself.
See, I get it in supermarkets where I have to reach up and get everything down for people.
Yeah, but you must offer, though. You must sort of think, they're going to have to climb in a minute. I will just offer, just to be nice.
Sometimes, or they just ask me.
Yeah, I'm one of those short people, though, who's so blooming obstinate. I will get it, whether... And the funniest thing was when I had this lady ask me to reach something for her as I was walking towards her, and then she realised she was actually taller than me, but for some reason I could reach it and she couldn't. So I don't know why that is, but no, I'm one of those people. I am really sort of I will get it. I will get it. I don't care if I have to climb these sort of shelving units to get it, or pull things or throw things at it so it falls on me. I will get it. Yeah,
climb up and reach it. I'll get there somehow.
Yeah, the rope's going round the sort of beams at the top, and I'm swinging on it to get it, but I will get it.
I like that. It's very good. Very good.
Or
brilliant.
I have actually lifted my kids up before onto my shoulders to reach stuff. I can't believe I'm telling you this.
No, I can't either, but never mind.
You've got that kind of personality, Barrie. You feel like you can tell you anything.
Well, I'm just down to earth. That's the thing I like.
Yeah, but you're not down to earth. You're in the sky. You're not. I'm.
I know. I'm sure, actually, when we recorded, didn't I stand on the step lower or something?
Yeah,
on
2
the
steps lower, if I remember
I did,
right.
actually, yeah.
So that we were both the same height. Because otherwise I came up to your belly button. For anyone who thinks, what the hell are those two talking about? When Barry and I first met at Sage Paracon last November, when I was the roving reporter, we had quite a good laugh, didn't we?
Oh, do you know what? What an amazing weekend. I mean, MJ and all the team, were brilliant, and it was tremendous. I mean, I loved it, because, I mean, I got there on, I think it was the Thursday afternoon, so I was there Friday, Saturday and Sunday. And it was brilliant. It was just non-stop, constant people through the door. There was always something happening, whether it was a talk or a meet people, whatever. There was something always happening, and it was a brilliant show. And, I'll be there again this year as well.
Oh, are you? You're going again this year?
Yes. Huh?
Cool.
Yeah, I'll be there this year.
Cool. Well, I think the thing I liked about it when I was there, definitely what I saw on the Saturday, was the camaraderie between all the guests. The sort of celebrity guests. There was no ego. Everyone was sort of there was an awful lot of. I mean, I do remember sitting there with Richard a step, and we looked over at you, and it was just like, gosh, it's a what was it, a barrière, because you were sitting in between your not billboards, what would you call?
Oh, my banners.
Your banners,
yeah.
And you got a Barrie on one side, a Barrie in the middle, and a Barrie on. It was a barrière, and things like that were coming out, and it was just. Oh dear, I don't.
But we did. But the funny thing was that weekend, I think us three actually clicked, because we realised we're all of the same age.
We are, yeah. Or Rich is the youngest. I'm in the middle. But yeah, we're the 73 club, aren't we? The 73.
We are, yeah. That was it. Yeah, that was it. And but it was a great weekend. Like you say. I mean, I remember having breakfast with Richard in the morning. Whoever was up early, we all used to go and grab a table, and it was lovely. Because you just met people in a different light. And that's what I enjoy about it. Same as, MJ, we very often have a chat, we ring each other up. I know me and you message each other, and it's lovely that, you build this whole friendship up, don't you, outside of it, which I think is fantastic.
Yeah, no, it's nice to see people, see people as human beings, as opposed to sort of what the media kind of pushes them out as that, in that sort of sense. But it was I mean, I was only there obviously for the day, but it was very it was an awesome atmosphere. The way all you celebs bounced off each other, and and the jokes that were flying around, and you had Karen with everything had "and shit" tagged on the end of it, and yeah, it was just. It was funny.
You see, Karen was great. I mean, me and Karen, I don't really remember. We did a little Ouija board session outside between us as a bit of fun, and it was fantastic. Yeah, I wish we'd have had time to do more, to be honest, because
as soon
as we touched the board, it just took off. It was like that was it. It was on the go.
Yeah.
And I so wish that we'd have had more time. And we've done a couple of shows together in the meantime. Over. Karen's interviewed me, and we've had chats, and it's been brilliant. It really has.
No, she was lovely. I liked her. She had me in stitches, especially when she came up to me and she said, "Do you think my makeup's too much? Do you think I look like a streetwalker?" "No, Karen, you look lovely." "Here, Penny, put on my coat. It'll look lovely on you." Okay. Yeah, she was very, very. Everyone was very warm. Everyone was very. They felt very genuine. Very sort of. I think at one point I was thirsty, and I think Aaron was going off to get a drink, and he was like, "Can I get you anything?" I said, "Can I just have a Diet Coke?" And he was like, "You sure that's all you?" "Yes, please." He comes straight back with a Diet Coke for me, and I'm thinking, this is the life. I'll just sit here and let people sort of fuss over me.
Yeah, but you tend to find, you find this, don't you? Those sort of events, everybody looks after each other because it's been non-stop. And, I remember the Haunted guys fetching me a coffee at one point, and it was like, when you just want 2 minutes and just go, "Can I just have a drink? I just need a break," and it was nice. I mean, I was doing readings down there. I was chatting with people, who was doing talks, demonstrations. And, it's nice when you see this whole sort of, I don't know what you call it, congregation of people, coming in to see people and just generally chat. I mean, it's funny enough because I'm just sat in my little consultation room at home, and I've got the Stargazer Ouija board here looking at me, which is the one that everybody signed.
Oh, lovely.
Yeah, so, it's great memories, isn't it? Things that will always stay with you.
Yes. Yeah, and how some people, I know when I was chatting to Katrina, no ego there whatsoever. one of the most down-to-earth, considering how well-known she is, down-to-earth. And we discovered that we both had a love of rock music, and the fact we were talking about different songs to cover, rock songs, and then the fact that her fiance loved rugby, and she'd not met anyone who could play rugby in the UK, and so me and my husband both can, so we'd sort of provisionally arranged if they get over here we'll take them to a rugby game so that he can sit and talk rugby to me and my husband, but it'll probably end up being my husband, and I can sit explaining it to her and things like that, conversations you don't expect.
It is. I used to play rugby many years ago.
That doesn't surprise me, but from where you're from and your height, and but I say and your height. I mean, I'm 5'2" and I played, but where you're from, like the Midlands and stuff.
I used to love it. I really
Union,
did.
Though?
Union.
You were Union. Ah,
yeah.
You had to have been a second rower.
Yeah, I was. Yeah. How did you guess?
Lucky. Just lucky, I guess.
But you miss it, don't you, in a way? I do, anyway. I used to love it. But I think it was too many injuries that did me. It was too many falls on the knees and people jumping on you. And in the end, it was just like, do you know what? I've got to stop.
Mine was more, the amount of training I would have to do to stay fit for it. I couldn't do a job as well, put it that way, because I would have, training 2 or 3 times a week, actually just rugby training, then I'd have been I go to the gym 3 or 4 times a week anyway to weight train, but I'd have probably had to be training 5 or 6 days a week as well. So I sort of made the decision when I had the kids that, no, perhaps it's up to them now to take on the mantle, but I know my husband still misses it. And I must admit, if I watch it on telly, I just think, wouldn't it be nice to plough into a few people? But they're all younger than faster than me now, so...
Just don't think about doing that in the supermarket, though, will you?
It depends if they get on my nerves. If they won't move their trolleys because they're blocking an aisle talking, they might actually get rammed, but they get warned first. No, both my boys will be playing soon. The older one's just started. He plays tag at school and he wants to start playing properly. But the younger one is going to be a forward for definite. I think the older one's probably a scrum half actually, but the younger one, he's got to be a flanker because he just ploughs into things and doesn't seem to get hurt. So. And I think it teaches them so much about confidence, about determination, carrying on with things, respect.
It does, definitely.
Yeah.
So, but
no, I love the game. I love the game. But I did say to Katrina that if her and her other half get over here, just to let me know, and I'll get them to a rugby game. Probably be a little club game, but then again, it doesn't have to be a big, international.
No. We'll have to do that next time when we all get together. We'll have to try and go and watch a match or something.
I'd love that. I'd love that.
Definitely. Brilliant.
Quite happy to go. Quite happy. Well, seeing as my team of European champions as of Sunday again, Saturday.
Here we go.
Saracens. I'm a Saracens supporter, and we won the European on Saturday.
Yeah, they did, didn't they?
They did. Beat Leinster.
Gosh, I know. You see, I don't really support it much now because I don't get time, so I don't tend to watch it and follow it as much as what I used to do.
Yeah.
But I'm involved in quite a few things locally, so I help with our local sort of football club, Mansfield Town, and they were just due this weekend. Their match, what they had against Newport, would have put them up into Wembley if they'd have won it. So we're really gutted at the moment for them because they've tried so hard to get up there. But I do loads of stuff with them in the background. Again, through the event side of things, we set up an inclusion group, which is basically getting people back out into the community, getting people to go and watch football, and getting them back into sports, really, and everything. So it's
how can a rugby
supporter
support a football club?
I know, and people have asked me this. People have asked me this. And you know what? No, because the funny thing is, when I go to the football, they all talk to me, and I go, "Don't know anything about football. I'm a rugby boy." Deary me.
No, when my eldest said he wanted to play football, I took one look at him and went, "You're not playing football." And he did at school for a while. Now he's decided he actually does prefer rugby because he's actually better at it than he is at football. And it's like, well, I could have told you that, dude. You've got 2 rugby players for parents. I mean, But him and my husband are Spurs fans, so they're quite excited at the moment. But I I don't mind local football. I have not so much of a problem with, because it's more grassroots. It's more how it should be, not this sort of I've broken a nail, therefore I'm going to roll around until they give me a penalty kind of game.
Yeah, But it is. Yeah. It's very different nowadays, isn't it? I mean, as I say, I try and support local groups. I don't support it nationally. You know, I don't go out there supporting like all the big teams anymore, because I don't have time to follow them anymore. You know, same as the rugby side of things. You know, as much as I used to love and sit and watch a match, I think there's nothing nicer on a day like today where you can be sat in a pub grounds and, you know, you're having a drink and you're sat there watching the rugby. Brilliant. But, you know, for me, you know, I always tend to be working most weekends. I tend to work most evenings.
Yeah.
And then I think, well, actually, you know what, I want a bit of me time as well somewhere in between all this process. So it's not the easiest of things. But no, well done to him. Get them into rugby. Get the boys into rugby.
Definitely. Oh, that's my hope. Well, the older one is learning to play the drums as well now. So music and rugby by the looks of it. So I'm quite happy with that. And the older one wants to be a ghost hunter.
Oh, even better! Come on.
Well, I don't know if you've heard me say this, but after I did Bomb in Jail with Richard Estep in March, and I've told this story on air before, so anyone who's heard it, I am sorry, but I phoned my son the day after the first night's investigation, because he loves hearing about it, and he's 9, nearly 10, and the first thing he said to us, "So, Mummy, was the prison very active last night?" Not, "Mummy, were there loads of ghosts?" or "Mummy, did you see anything?" No, "Mummy, was the prison very active last night?" And that's like first brownie point to him, and he uses that all the time now. He was like, "Is that the right thing to say?" And I went, "Yes, that is the perfect thing to say." So now whenever he speaks to any sort of investigator friends of mine, he's like, "So where do you go that's the most active?" And they're like, "Oh, we love this child." And then he was putting 2 and 2 together, because I said there was French coming through on the voice generator type device. And he was saying, "Well, that could have been prisoners from the Napoleonic Wars, Mummy." And I was like, "How do you know? You haven't studied the Napoleonic Wars." I mean, I've never talked about the Napoleonic Wars. He'd obviously looked it up. So Brilliant. Very proud mummy moments. But then when I did Harwich Readout the other weekend, the next day he was like, "So, Mummy, was it active then?" And I went, and my husband goes, "She'll tell you it was interesting." I said, "Well, it was interesting. It was quite active." And I showed him a picture we'd got in the vortex.
Yeah.
And he was like, "Wow, Mum, I can see like a lady there." And he said, "But how did you validate that? What other things did you do?" And I'm just like, "You're 9 and you're thinking like this already? Oh my gosh." You know, and one of his friends at school came up to me last night, was asking me some more questions. And I talk about it if they ask me, but I don't go up to everyone and go, "Oh, by the way, this is what I do in my spare time." But a lot of the mums know, because quite a few of them have read my book and all this. And she turns around to me and she said, she was asking me some really intelligent questions about how do you validate if it's a spirit or not, and what sort of can you use in your own body if you haven't got equipment. And I was sort of telling her a few things, and she went, "Do you know what I'd like? I want an SLS camera." And I was like, "How do you know what this kid? How do you know what an SLS camera is?" She goes, "Well," she said, "I thought I'd look into it." She goes, "I've looked into that ghost detector thing," and she said, "And I agree with you. I think that's a bit of a gimmick." She said, "But the SLS camera looks very cool." And I was like, "Well, I want an SLS camera, and I'm 30 years older than you, so I think I'm going to get one first."
Do you know, it always amazes me when with events nowadays where people come with the apps on the iPhone and things, you know, Ghost Finder and things like that, and I get, my heart just sinks, because I think, you know what, at the end of the day, all they are is a gimmick on a phone.
Yeah.
You know, it's not a tool. It's not a tool of the paranormal trade, as we call it. And you know, I get really bewildered by people when they're walking around with their iPhone, going, "Oh, well, there's nothing in here because my phone tells me."
Yeah.
And I just think, you know, come on, guys, we've spent years and years and years trying to prove that there's something, prove that there's life after death, using equipment that we've managed to find to determine some sort of proof. And I just think that, you know, the modern sort of day, let's call them ghost hunters, you know, who are coming into the industry now, are looking at it totally different to how we used to.
Yeah, I mean, I've used a couple of apps that have produced results, but then again, I suppose you could say a clock is right twice a day. A broken clock is right twice a day. But the portal system that you can download onto, I think it's Android, I've had some interesting stuff come through on that. I had one, I think it was at Highlands House, it kept saying penny, corporal, penny, corporal, penny, corporal. And when I went back in there on my own with a normal ovolus, the Corporal Terry Knott were the 3 words that came through. So that was an interesting one. And there's an iOvolus app you can download that's basically the same people who create the Ovolus. And that's had some quite interesting and applicable stuff come through without having to shoehorn a theory into it. It was like, okay, that's weird. But I think things like those ghost detector apps and all that kind of stuff, and Ghost Finder, and I just think, no, you shouldn't need them. You should just be able to use your senses. Your senses are the most powerful thing you've got.
Yeah, I totally agree with that, and this is where, when I go in a lot of the time, I don't want equipment. I just want to go in, see what I feel, see what we sense, and then take it from there. And if we've got any equipment that can almost confirm something or almost clarify something, then to me, that's an added bonus, but I think sometimes we can get a little bit too hung up, or people can, in terms of what the equipment's saying, rather than going in there and going, well, actually, what do you feel? What do you sense in this room?
Yeah, I agree. So talking about events, have you got anything coming up at the moment, Barry?
Oh, gosh, I'm run off my feet at the moment. I've got all sorts coming up at the moment. I mean, I know next month in June, I don't think I've got an evening free, to tell you the truth, in June, but this month I've got a quiet week this week, but next week I've got 4 demonstrations next week. I've got one at Langworth, I've got one at Doncaster, I've got another one, I'm just trying to think off the top of my head, at Nottingham, and there's another one as well. So I've got them coming up all over the place, and I mean, these are, everything just seems to be selling out at the moment, which I'm so pleased about.
Yeah.
And we're even releasing more tickets at the moment. One of them that we did at the Punch Bowl in Nottingham, we did that the beginning of the month, and we said that we'd sell 40 tickets, and in the end we sold nearly 100.
Wow.
So it was like, blooming heck, I didn't expect that to happen, because I actually quite like the intimate evenings of mediumship, where I keep the numbers quite small, because it's okay people going to the big shows, but as I always say to them, unfortunately, when I read, I can only read so many people. I can't read 100 people in one night. It's impossible. But, I like the intimate evenings. And then, obviously, we've still got some of the ghost hunts coming up. So I've got a charity ghost hunt coming up at the end of next month, which is at the Palace Theatre in Newark-on-Trent. And that's with the charity that I support that's very dear to my heart, called HUG, called Helpers Grieve. And basically that's for parents and people that have lost children or miscarried or stillborn children. And it's basically, supporting them through the grieving process, and helping them basically to move on a little bit, And I think it's so important that, we support these sort of charities nowadays.
Yeah.
I've always wanted to give something back to the charities that I support. And over the years, I've supported anything from Dogs Trust to dementia to Alzheimer's to cancer to, gosh, you name it, anything and everything, really. And it's my way of returning a favour, my way of giving back. And I think that's so important what we do.
So if someone wants to go to that event, where would they get the tickets from?
If they want to go to the Newark Palace Theatre, there's a poster on my website, or there's details on my website, or you can get it on Facebook. And if you get in touch with us, I'll give you more info. But that's at the end of June, and I can't remember the date off the top of my head, but I will tell you in just a second. It's the 28th of June.
Wow, look at that. So multitasking, Barry.
I know. You see how good I am. I have to have everything on my diary. Honestly. But there are numerous sort of demonstrations coming up, mediumship nights. I still run the 2 development groups every month. So there's one at Mansfield, one at Belper that I run. And again, if anybody's interested, just get in touch with us. 3 hours, one-to-one sort of tuition with me is what they get. And, it's tremendous, And then on top of that, obviously, we've got all the Psychic Today TV coming up next month again as well, which we've started doing. Yeah, so that's phenomenal for us. We really enjoyed that, and again, it's almost like showcasing what we can deliver, what we can do, and getting the word out into the market, not only for me, but for everybody, really, and it's the one thing I've always pushed whenever we've done any sort of TV shows, is that I do it for all of us. to prove that actually, you know what, we're professional people. You know, we've got a serious side in what we're doing. And, you know, I want people to see us as that, you know, and as you know, I do a lot of work with Cal Cooper, Professor Cal Cooper down at Northampton.
Yeah,
and
we love Cal.
You know,
we love Cal at Parasearch.
Cal's been a friend of mine for probably getting on nearly 20 years now. You know,
yeah, but he's not very old, is he? Cal?
No, Cal's not. No, I mean, I remember Cal before he got into it, let's say, whatever you wish to call it. You know, I remember him going on some of the first events I was doing at Plesley Vale Mills, and I think he come on some at the Galleries of Justice with us at Nottingham. So it was tremendous, you know, and it's great seeing him where he's got to now. So, I mean, me and him very often meet up for breakfast or a coffee and a chat about what we can do together. And, you know, hopefully, you know, we'll have some events planned this year as well. So probably a little bit later on. But you know, yeah, it's all's good at the moment. We're keeping busy. And then on top of that, there's all the private readings that I do and consultations that I do. Brilliant. So how, I mean... All right, I'm going to sound... this is going to sound wrong the way I'm going to say this. It's not meant to, but it will. You're not your stereotypical medium, I don't think. I mean, you're a big guy, as you said. You're a former rugby player. You know, your day job that you had was not one you'd associate with someone who, you know, had a gift and was openly using it. How did you come into knowing that you had a gift and being comfortable using it? Does that make sense? It does. Do you know what? Totally. And I fully understand what you're asking there, because, you know, I've always known from being a child, really, you know, I was lucky because my mum's side were very sort of mediumistic. You know, they were very much into physical mediumship, materialization, apporting things, you know, table levitation, you name it. And you know, when I was brought up, we always got all these stories told to us by my mum. And, you know, for me, it was like massive fascination. But, you know, looking back and obviously at that time, probably not realising what I had, because I always remember seeing like images outside the window or almost like people walking backwards and forwards trying to get my attention. And I think at times I probably didn't understand it, if you know what I mean. It was like, well, that's what it is. That's just what's happening. And I just accepted it.
Yeah.
And then later on in life, I was probably about 10, 11. People used to say, oh, do us a card reading. So I used to go, oh, okay, then I'll do it for you. And to me, it was a bit of a parlour trick. You know, it was a bit of fun, you know. And they used to go, well, how do you know that? And I go, I don't know. That's what I'm getting. And it just developed, you know, and it developed to when we got into teenage years. You know, me and some friends used to go little mini ghost hunts, and we used to do seances. We used to do Ouija board sessions at each other's houses. And for me, it was massive. You know, it was like, God, I really love this. I love it. And it just developed, you know, it got me one thing into another. And eventually I got heavily involved with the SNU, the Spiritualist National Union, got onto their education board, started to teach for them, and then got onto committees of churches. And then it just, one thing led to another, you know, it just opened so many doorways up. And, you know, once obviously you start getting recognised in terms of being on TV and doing TV shows, you know, the world's really your oyster to a point, you know. And for me, I mean, I travel around so much, you know. I mean, anywhere from, you know, the Middle East. I normally go to the Middle East a couple of times a year. This year I'll be out to Spain. I'll be out to Germany working. We've also got Italy in there at the moment for, I think it's about September-ish sort of time. But, you know, it's brilliant because you just end up just getting picked up. I don't know how else to say it, really. You know, people just contact me out of the blue and go, will you do as a show? Will you do as this? Will you do as a weekend? Will you do as a retreat? And I go, yeah, I'll do it. I enjoy it. I'll do it. And, you know, it's funny because before the show, we were briefly just chatting about professions. And for me, you know, my whole sort of profession that I went into, you know, my construction and legal and commercial field has really become second hand now to me. You know, it's become, it's not my priority. And I think when we're younger, we strive to get the best, don't we? We want to get to the top of the ladder in a profession.
Yeah.
And for me, that was always my profession, you know, where I ended up, you know, getting into very senior management, deputy MDs, you know, director. And then once I got there, I thought, actually, you know what, this isn't what I want out of life anymore.
Yeah.
so my mediumship just became, my priority, and I still, I have my legal construction business still that I do, my consultancy. But I have to say, it's took a real step back for me now because, I've evaluated my life quite a lot over the last couple of years, and my mediumship's my priority. The historical side that I get involved with is a priority to me as well. So we'll talk about that, no doubt, in a few minutes. But
what do you reckon? On a show called Haunted Histories, do you think we're going to talk history?
Well, I hope we are. Yes, but I love it. Because I think, let's be honest. My gosh, we're in a country that has got history going back so far. And it's phenomenal, isn't it? Yeah. I think sometimes we take what's on our doorstep for granted and we don't realise what's there at times.
I think the more history a country has got, the more they take it for granted, because one of the things that I notice is when I go to places like Greece, and I love the Greeks, and I love the Greek islands, and Greece is a country, and they've got literally on every doorstep, on every corner, there is something old. And they're like, oh yeah, that's just from 856 BC, there's nothing important. Because they've got such a proliferation of it. Yeah, you then go to somewhere like America, and America's got history. It's just not history that's been documented with the Native Americans and everything else. Because I was having this conversation with my husband the other day. But their history is probably only really about 250 years old. Their sort of accepted history, I suppose you could call it. So they're like, God, if we had a building that was built in, 1066... We would have it covered in cotton wool, basically, to protect it. We wouldn't be letting people traipse up and down the stairs of an old castle. And it's that kind of, the older the country is, the more they seem to be a bit like blasé about their history, because they've got so much of it. And one of the things that I've always had that fascination with history, and I a bit like you're saying your mother's to credit for your embracing of having a gift. My parents are to blame for my love of history, because from the as small as I can remember, we're going to a museum, or we're going to a stately home, or we're going to a castle. And although at the time I was a bit like, oh, not again, once I got to about 13, 14 and started to really enjoy it, actually probably a bit younger than that, 11, 12, started to really enjoy it, I was like, oh good, can we go to this one? Can we go to this one? Can we go to this one? So, and as I've got older, I've got more able to sort of dig into it and find out stuff that the place themselves don't tell you, or find out about that field over there that just looks like a farmer's field. Well, actually, in 1428, for example, such and such happened over there, and that's what I'm now trying to pass on to my children. That kind of, and even more modern stuff, like when we go to visit my mum and dad in Norfolk, we have to drive past an old workhouse.
Oh, is that Gresson Hall?
No, it's not actually Gresson Hall. But very good. Brownie points for knowing that. No, it's at Pulham Market. It's like a load of offices and a garden centre now, but it is an old workhouse. It was originally a workhouse for that area. I can tell workhouses literally as I drive past them because of the way the design of them. I can almost guarantee. Anyway, so since my eldest was about 5 or 6, every time we drove past it, I'd be like, do you know what that building was? What is it, Mummy? And I'd explain it. And so every time we'd test him to see if he remembered, and gradually giving him more and more facts about what life was like in a workhouse. Yeah. And he was quite shocked once he reached 7, and I was like, oh, by the way, you wouldn't be allowed to stay with me now you're 7. You'd have had to go and live in the boys' dorm without me. You'd never see me. You'd only see me on a Sunday in church. What? And things like that. So it's sort of teaching him, but in a way that he remembers. And he remembers nearly all of it. So it's that kind of passing that information on, but not in a, workhouse bad, everyone's starved in them. Actually, no. Workhouses were people's last resort, and a lot of them would have starved if they weren't in them. Look at it that way. And sort of what, and he says, it's not fair. Why could you and Daddy not have been together? And it's like, well, we might have had more babies. Oh, and that would have cost the workhouse more money to feed, wouldn't it? Oh, yeah. Explaining it in a way that it doesn't seem so barbaric. Well, it wasn't for then. It was logical. It might be barbaric to us now, but it isn't really. And, and going past an old when I take him to where my dad goes flying in Norfolk and explain to him that this was an old airfield and showing him the Liberator aircrafts that would have been based there, and just making it real and making it sort of applicable.
It is true. It's absolutely true, though. I mean, as you know, I work at Newstead Abbey now, and it started out, I did it as a voluntary sort of role because I enjoy history. I love the building. I've got, I think Lord Byron was tremendous, the sixth Lord in terms of his poetry and his information.
Mad, bad and dangerous to know.
Well, yeah, totally. That was Caroline Lamb, but yet he described her as a volcano. And I think there's some immense stories that come out, but as you know, I've got ancestry links up there. My 5 times great grandfather was manservant to the Byrons.
And when did you actually find this out? Because you wrote a brilliant article in Haunted Mag the last Haunted Mag, because it wasn't really last month, was it? It was like February time.
Yes, it was.
And I mean, reading through it as a historian as well, because I would say I'm probably more a historian and then an investigator, whereas some people are investigators with a dabbling in history. If someone said to me, you can never investigate again, but you can carry on doing history, I'd be all right. But if it was the opposite way round, I'd probably have words with them, you know what I mean?
Yeah.
But there was so much history in that and so much information to do with we'll call him your great-grandfather for make your life easier, Joe Murray. There was so much information in there. I was intrigued. When did you actually find out?
Well, we'd always known for years, because, I mean, when one of my ancestors, one of my great-uncles was alive, he did the family tree, and he got us back to the 1300s on my dad's side, in terms of the family name and connections, which was phenomenal. And obviously, Joe Murray kept coming up, and Joe died in 1820. But, he served the house for 70 years. And, we always knew this, it was something we always knew about. And I remember one of my dad's brothers, when he was over from Australia, we always had to go up to the Abbey, and he'd always stand under the photo and get his picture taken with the portrait of Joe.
Because it's a beautiful portrait, isn't it?
Oh, he looked so much like him, though. That was the scary thing, And obviously that comes down through Dad's side. But for me, it was always this fascination of thinking, gosh, he worked there for 70 years. He used to open the place up and he used to close it down, and he used to, he was basically, organise the house, and in the documents that we've got up at the Abbey, it actually says that Byron, the poet, looked upon Joe as a father figure. And I think, gosh, how amazing is that? And then there's some great stories about Joe where he'd singing sea shanties in the kitchen, and the older sort of maids wouldn't be impressed with him because he was very rude, and I think, oh, well, there you go then, that's where I get it from.
You've never sung a sea shanty to me, Barry.
No, do you know what? I don't think I'd know one, actually.
Oh, okay.
But I think it's tremendous, when you find these links in your family where you start looking back. So, once I started volunteering up there, and I thought, actually, I really enjoy this. And it actually took me away from all the hassle of life. It was sort of like my freedom.
Yeah.
And then they asked me to be a tour guide for them. So I'm now one of the tour guides up there.
Oh.
So, so I take people on private tours, talk to them about the history, but even there, the building itself, the original building dates back to 1163.
Yeah.
So there's doorways that you can stand in and you can touch, you can go in the chapel, and it all goes back to 1163. Goodness me, you can't even envisage that, can you, in terms of an age?
Well, you can't, but I've done the Canterbury ghost tour with before, and it's fascinating, especially when the chapman, I've just completely forgotten his name, and he's going to kill me for this because I do actually know him, but when he's describing the assassination of Thomas Becket, which was obviously the reason that King Henry II actually built Newstead. Well, it's called an abbey, but it was actually a priory, wasn't it?
It was a priory.
It was a priory, not an abbey.
Yeah.
And it was his allowance, or whether he did, request the murder of Thomas Becket, or whether he just didn't say no when his lord said they were going to kill him. We're not quite sure. There's arguments on both sides apparently, but Thomas Becket was slain quite vociferously slain by some of Henry's lords, and Henry, for penance, had Newstead built.
He did. Yeah, he did. Yeah.
So its whole start was pretty bloody, really.
Oh, gosh, yeah, goodness me. And you're right, it was a priory. Even though we call it an abbey now, we think that the abbey name was taken over when the Byron family took over in about 1540. And they they changed it to this sort of priory name, after the dissolution of the abbey name from the priory because of the dissolution of the monastery.
Yeah.
But I mean, there's very little there that stands of the original sort of priory now, because it was obviously part of the agreement when the Byron family took it over with the deal, basically, that they destroy the actual part of the religious building.
But didn't they recently, say recently, I'm talking 1805, didn't they dredge the lake and found the lectern?
Did.
And it's now,
is
it in Southwell Minster or something?
Yeah, the Eagle lectern was found in it, because what they always said was when it was obviously the dissolution time, they threw everything into the lake to hide it, so that they wouldn't take it, so Henry's men wouldn't take it. And unfortunately, when they dredged it, the only thing they found was the Eagle lectern, which there's some great pictures of it, by the way, on the internet. But it's in Southwell Minster now. And then, there wasn't really anything else found, to tell you the truth, in it. But, you got to remember, the Wicked Lord, who was Byron's great uncle, he literally sold everything off. He was the fifth Lord, and he sold everything off because he didn't want to leave anything to his son.
Because his son wanted to marry someone that he didn't approve of or something, wasn't it? So he thought he'd ruin him rather than leave him anything. And I just, oh dear, it's like an episode of EastEnders, isn't it?
Do you know what? It's brilliant. Once you get into it, it is phenomenal, some of the stories, And I mean, we've got one of the sale documents up there. And it was a 6-day sale that they had. And basically they sold everything from, you name it, door handles, windows, doors, pottery, bedding, sheets, everything was sold off. And unfortunately for the Wicked Lord, his son William died before him. So he had nobody to leave it to, which is where poor old Byron the poet inherited.
But his grandson also died, didn't he? His grandson died in battle in 1794.
That was it.
So he had no immediate family left, and it had to go down to, as you say, his great nephew, whose dad was a naval officer,
he was,
and his nickname was Mad Jack, who slit his own throat.
Yeah, you had Mad Jack, who died in France, that was Byron's father, and basically his mother was Catherine of Guyte, who was a very wealthy lady. She was connected to the Stuart family originally, and she had a mass fortune, and obviously Mad Jack decided to sell everything off, and, he spent all the money and left her with nothing, so she decided to go up to Inverness with Byron and live up there with him on her own. But, she didn't have any money at all at that point because Mad Jack had spent it. And then obviously you've got Byron's grandfather, so Mad Jack's father, who was Foul Weather Jack. And basically, he was another naval man, but used to crash all the ships. So honestly, there's some tremendous stories. And I mean, obviously, with my links then to Byron and to the Wicked Lord through Joe Murray, it really starts. I find it weird. When I open up, if I have to open up and unlock, I always say it's like walking in his footsteps.
Yeah. And
I could imagine him walking around and unlocking all these doors and, making sure all the rooms are set for him coming in. And it's lovely, and I do have to say, there's only been one time in all the time I've been there that spooked me, which was probably about 2 weekends ago. I was unlocking. And I remember unlocking what we call Byron's dining room, which was the Prior's parlour originally, and it was Byron's dining room when he lived there, the poet Byron, so everybody knows. And I remember going in, and all I could smell was as though somebody had just put out a fire. When a fire, when it's just burning away and the embers are just gone. And the only thing we have in there is a visual effect. We have no fires in the house.
Right.
And that smell followed me all the way from the dining room right up until I got up into Byron's bedroom.
Really?
And suddenly that was it. As I was coming down the spiral staircase from his bedroom, it just dispersed and left me. And I thought, okay, was that him following me, or was that Joe following me for a reason? I don't know. But it was the only time that it really not spooked me, but I just thought there's somebody else here with me now.
So whenever you've been at Newstead, even before you started working there as a tour guide, was there kind of that feeling of, have you had communication from anyone who's lived there, or is it just more of a feeling of I'm home?
Since I've been there, do you mean now?
Well, since you've been going there, since you sort of had an attraction to the place.
Oh, I think I've always known that there was something there. Again, when I've walked around, even as a child, I remember going up there and feeling very homely with it, and you never, when you're a child, you're never quite sure why, really. But then I think once we established the link to the family, we realised that actually that's probably the reason why. I mean, put it this way, somebody wouldn't work there for 70 years if they were so unhappy with it. And interestingly enough, obviously Joe's son, James Murray, actually then invented the circular saw. So the circular saw that we all use today was actually invented by Joe Murray's son, which is a phenomenal story. It's like you just end up in this big ricochet of family history.
But I think history is like that. I mean, no matter what. I mean, when I did do a show last year on Newstead with another group, but yours was going to be a slightly different way of looking at it. So I definitely wanted to talk about it again, because it's a fascinating place. I think I should be talking about it on a regular basis. Some people go there, but the fact that Byron's daughter was Ada Lovelace.
Yeah.
And now I know there's a lot of people who are going, that sounds like a porn star's name. It does sound a bit like a porn star name, but Ada was a mathematician, and she worked with Babbage.
She did.
On what they think is the original computer programming.
Yeah.
So, and I mean, what an amazing lineage. I mean, her father's one of the most sort of well-known poets ever.
Yeah.
And she's one of the original mathematicians, and a she as well.
Exactly,
but then you've got to look at Shelley, who was one of his best friends.
Yes.
Mary Shelley's mum was Mary Wollstonecraft. Mary Shelley being Mary Shelley, who wrote Frankenstein. Her mum, Mary Wollstonecraft, was one of the original suffragettes back in the 1700s. And these whole lives are all intertwined. All these amazing people in history.
And when you think about it, I mean, you think about Claire Clairmont that he had an affair with, who was also a cousin of the Shelleys, and he had another daughter with Claire Clairmont, Allegra. And Allegra was put into a convent, and she died at the age of 5, unfortunately. But even jumping back to Ada, I mean, Ada was taken away by her mother, Annabella Milbank, because she said she didn't want her to inherit the family madness, as she called it. But the funny thing is, when Ada died, well, even before she died, she made a very big confession to her husband, the Earl of Lovelace. And it was about the August before she died, and she confessed something. We still don't know what, because it was never documented, but he cut her out of his life from that point.
But she died at the same age as her dad.
Age as her father, and she's actually in the Byron tomb as well in Hucknall, but she never knew her father.
Yeah.
She never knew her father, and yet she described herself as a poetic scientist. Yeah. When she died, it was said that she was a true Byron, she was a drinker, she was a gambler, and she obviously enjoyed her life in the bedroom, let's say it that way. So
free with her sexual favours, I think I was going to say.
That's a lovely way to put that, yes, that's a very nice way to put it. But yes, and things like that are phenomenal when you look at it, and I mean, they're just looking at it at the moment in terms of getting Ada put on the new £50 note.
Yeah.
So,
but it's the whole thing of nature versus nurture, isn't it? Because a lot of people would say it's nurture that would have made her... I don't like the word promiscuous. I'm going to use the free with her sexual favours, and a drinker and a gambler. She would have that's learnt behaviour. You don't inherit it. Well, her mum wasn't like that. I mean, from what I've read about her mum, she was very straight laced, no sense of humour, very sort of down the line sort of person. It was her dad who was like that, who she never spent time with. She didn't know. I think she was 8 when he died, something like that. So
in that region,
yeah. So how did she know any of this? It must be inherited. So where did George Byron inherit it from? Did he inherit from his mum, who was meant to be... Caroline was meant to be a bit sort of wacky, wasn't she? A bit out there. Or did he inherit it from Mad Jack? Or, so it does bring on that whole nature versus... Or did she think, well, I'm half Byron, therefore this is how I'm meant to act, and also almost subconsciously acted like that. But the fact that she died at exactly the same age as her dad, 36, which even back in sort of, the 1800s, wasn't that normal for people of upper class to die that young?
It wasn't, no. And I mean, Byron obviously died at 36 from a fever. He died in Greece, where he's a hero in Greece. I mean, goodness me, he helped liberate Greece, and it was well known for it, and Ada then died of uterine cancer when she was 36. So it's like you say, at that age, I mean, that is phenomenal. When there's history of some of the Byrons living till the 70s and 80s. Yeah. And you think, well, Byron died at 36, she died at 36, which is really ironic. But you see, even before she died, the Wildman family actually used to invite her up to Newstead to come and get to know about her father, which is where I think she developed this love for him in a way. And when she was dying, she obviously wanted to be buried with him, so she's in the tomb with him. And it's lovely. I think it's a lovely, it's quite a strange love story in a way, but in a very nice way. That this person that never knew her father eventually wanted to be with him and not with her mother.
I would have, thinking about how I would have felt animosity towards my mother for never letting me know my dad. And she was a genius. Ada was a genius.
Yeah, she was, yeah.
Byron was a genius, just in different forms. And just, you don't all have to be, you can be a mathematical genius and you can have a sibling who's a literary genius. You don't, so that I just think she's amazing. And I think I like telling people who she was because, most people, I know when, they talk about things like the Enigma machine and all that, and they say that people like that were the pioneers of computing. Well, actually, no, go back 100 years and Ada Lovelace, and they're like, who? Yeah. And you kind of, I love, and the 36 thing, the fact that her and I, that's one of my favourite facts, because I just think it's so damn freaky that they both died at the same age. I find that really
spooky. It's very spooky in a way, isn't it? You don't realise it.
But what's your favourite fact that you can tell people about Newstead?
Oh, what's my favourite fact? It'd probably be, there's a couple, you see. You've got Bosun, who was Byron's dog. Everybody said he was a Newfoundland, but we believe he wasn't. We believe it was more of a collie stroke, sort of husky dog because of the colouring on him and the size of him. But he was born in Newfoundland, that's the thing.
Right, okay.
But you see, Bosun obviously used to go into the town, into Mansfield with the post boy. One day he went in with a post boy, never came back. And when he did came back, he'd been bitten by a rabid dog. And Byron nursed him right up until he died, and all his friends kept warning him, going, don't nurse him, he'll turn nasty, he'll bite you. And yet Bosun never once bit him, and we've actually still got the chair at the Abbey that Byron used to nurse him in, and you've got Bosun's tomb outside where Bosun's buried. And originally, you see, when the tomb was built, Byron always said it was for Bosun himself and for Joe Murray to go in.
Yeah.
So it's phenomenal. There's some great stories like that. I mean, so you've obviously got Bosun, you've got the Wicked Lord, for instance, who used to do fights on the lake, in proper sort of galleons, and they used to sail the servants up and down the lake. And used to fire live ammunition at them, to try and sink these galleons. So it was almost like a modern-day sort of battleships in a way, And I love them. I love all these stories, and these are real stories of it, phenomenal. I mean, we've got Ada. Funny you mention Ada, because we've got Ada's teething finger that belonged to her. It was modelled on her mother's little finger, and we've still got that in the cabinet in the library.
Wow.
And things like that you could just never envisage. I mean, the things that we've got that were Byron's, locks of hair. But you see, Byron, he was a little bit of a well, I don't know how you put it, a bad boy, because when women used to ask for locks of his hair, he actually used to send locks of the dog's hair. So all these people out there think they've got a lock of Byron's hair, and they haven't. They've got a lock of Bosun's hair. Or even Lion, Lion, who was, again, another sort of wild dog that he had up there. When you used to enter the Abbey, at the bottom of the original steps, there used to be the dog called Lion that was a huge dog. I mean, Byron's mother used to complain that it used to cost £20 a year to feed him in about 1810. And then on the other side, you used to have Bruin the bear, which was Byron's bear when he went to Cambridge. Yeah, when he went to Cambridge, because
he wasn't allowed a dog in his dorm.
Exactly. Yeah, you can't have a dog in the dorm, but in the contract it didn't say you can't have a bear. So he had Bruin the bear, the other side of the steps. And the story that I love telling people is, you can imagine turning up at Newstead, and at the bottom of the steps you've got this big lion dog. The other side you've got Bruin the bear. So you've got to get past them. And by the time you'd eventually made it up into the Great Hall and done a forward roll over barrels and everything else, which I always describe as it's a bit of a knockout, you get into the Great Hall and there'd be Byron there shooting at you with a pistol, probably, because that's what he used to use it as.
And handing you a skull with wine in.
The skull cup as well, which was phenomenal, when they used to dig up the cloisters and find the skull cups.
I think I think the thing is, one of the things someone said to me is no woman was safe around Byron.
Oh,
and
God.
I've said no man was safe around Byron. He was an equal opportunities lover.
It didn't make much difference, when we talk.
Love was love.
God almighty, Well, I think to Byron it was just an easy lay, put it that way.
I think I read a thing once. He said something about, what was it? I think it was something like men were better to talk to, but women were better kissers, or something like that.
Yeah. Well, it was known. You see, he never, when he had his ladies up there, his servants, let's call them, they weren't allowed to wear corsets. He liked a lady to be very free. In other words, so that it was, pardon the expression,
easy access.
Easy access, yes, that's a nice way to say it.
And don't worry, I'll translate all of these into sort of PC terms.
It's and he was well known for that because he, him and his friends obviously used to have some very great parties where they'd all disperse to different bedrooms with a lady at the end of the night, or some cases men.
Well, they weren't known as the Romantics for nothing.
Oh, good God, no. I mean, Byron, we've got records that he used to hire in monks' costumes, so obviously they used to have an element of fancy dress taking place.
I love it.
And he'd be dressed in his blue dining room in the monk's costume and, with all his friends around the table, and they'd all be drinking from the skull cups and probably brewing the beer in the corner of the room as well, playing games. And, it was just this whole world. But remember, he inherited it at 10 years old, for God's sake. 10 years old, you inherit this estate with all these farms and houses on and this beautiful, wreck of a mansion at that time. And he couldn't afford to live there. I mean, it was only overnight when he wrote Childe Harold's Pilgrimage that made him a well-known celebrity. It sold 500 copies overnight without any internet.
Yeah. Wasn't he only there for about 7 or 8 years before he sold it to the Colonel?
He was, because he sold it in 1818. But obviously, in between that time of inheriting it, he went off to university, so it was rented out for quite a while. He was at Harrow, he was at Cambridge, and then eventually he came back. Well, Mrs. Byron used to live in Southwall, and obviously she then moved back to the Abbey with him. So, it wasn't there that long. But, I mean, remember he sold it in 1818. But before that, he'd already left the country because of Caroline Lamb and Annabella Milbank that had spread all these rumours about him, even though they were true.
Having sex with his half-sister.
Exactly,
or didn't he have a baby with his half-sister?
Well, yes.
Yeah.
We think so, because, I mean, it was never properly documented. But the baby's father was actually put down as being her father in terms of name. But we know that the baby looked like Byron. So, there's some real stories there that get very sort of complicated, and him and Augusta always had a bit of a thing for each other, let's say, being his half-sister and everything. So it was quite phenomenal, really. But, I just think there's some tremendous stories when you go up there, and you don't realise it until you go in. I mean, we've got the original portrait of Byron. He had 2 of them, what he officially sat for. We've got one of them, and the Queen's got the other one in her private collection.
Yeah.
And it's things like that if you come up to the Abbey, literally you can be stood within 15 foot of that portrait.
Yeah.
And there's just so much. We've got swords that were Byron's, walking sticks, helmets, jackets. We've got locks of his hair in little caskets.
Oh, but are they really his, or are they both?
Well, we'd probably have to smell them first.
I'll say you'd probably have to DNA test them to check what
exactly
it is.
But when they opened the tomb in 1938, it was opened by Canon Barber because they didn't believe that Byron was in there at one point. And when they opened the tomb, the actual lid of the coffin had moved, and they said that it was so well preserved that you could actually see, his hair was exactly the same. It was all curly and dark. Yeah, his face, they said that you could recognise his face. His foot was, when they did the autopsy, they cut off his foot, but his foot was back in the coffin with him. So there's a real link to different stories up there when you look at it. It's phenomenal. It really is. It amazes me when I go back over time and start almost trying to dissect it, in a way. but when obviously Colonel Wildman took over, Thomas Wildman and his wife Louisa, she was Swiss. He was a very wealthy gentleman. Had inherited money and made money through plantations in Jamaica. He paid $94,500 for it and spent £100,000 renovating it. Yeah. Phenomenal amounts of money when you think about it.
And he loved the place, didn't he?
Oh, adored it. Absolutely adored it. And we've still got a lot of furniture in there that was his. There's a lot of furniture that was Byron's that's in the house again. But you see, one of the great stories that I love is when Thomas Wildman died, he left the instructions for the abbey to be sold because he didn't want Louisa, living there on her own because they were childless. And when it was sold, it went up for auction, and William Frederick Webb, who was a massive landowner from County Durham and Lincolnshire, he outbid Queen Victoria for it. He outbid her in 1860, and he paid £150,000 for it in 1860.
Okay.
So it's like, goodness me, you could imagine, Queen Victoria being there, pursing her lips and going, well, I'm really not happy about this. I'm not amused.
What is not amused?
Yeah, and you can imagine her working her way back off to London going, right, I'm really not happy, But it was always a family home, and that's the thing I love about the Abbey. It's when you go into it, there's various parts of it that have got some tremendous stories, but it was a home. It was a family home eventually. The Black Canons of Newstead had lived there for 400 years. But, it was never... when I think about it, and I think about it in terms of a priory, you probably think, oh, there was hundreds there. Well, no, there wasn't. There was about 12 to 15 canons lived there. That was it.
Yeah.
And even the bishop from Southwell had to come over and tell them off because apparently they used to get very rowdy on mead. Yeah. And he used to have to come over and tell them off and tell them to calm it down a little bit, I think. So you can imagine, they weren't what we depict as being very religious men. I think they were like, well, okay, let's have a good time. We're on our own here. Let's enjoy it. Well,
at the end of the day, some people joined the monastery because they had nowhere else to go, and it was a way of getting food and shelter, and things like the workhouses that we were talking about off air didn't exist. Oh, no. It's been fascinating talking to you, Barry. So I'm going to have to find out when you're. I'm going to have to let you know if I'm going to get up to Nottingham sometime, so you can give me a private tour, because that would be phenomenal. But I actually think, on this note, I know a lot of people associate Lord Byron with debauchery and taking advantage. I don't think he did. I don't think he took advantage of anyone. I just think he was one of those people that people are drawn to.
Yes.
And, it strikes me as he was just an incredible romantic who had sort of strange ideas about things. I don't think he meant to hurt anyone.
No, I don't think he did. And I think all I describe him of nowadays is like a modern-day pop star who enjoyed life, and I think he certainly did. When you look at what he did when he went to Italy, helping out with the war, what he did in terms of Greece, what he did helping out with them battle for the country, and let's be honest, all he did was enjoy his life, and if he did that with lots of women, then well done to him.
And men.
And men as well, yeah. But definitely.
Any port in a storm was our Byron, I think, by the sounds of it.
Yeah,
but then again, one of his most famous poems is Don Juan, so
it is.
Kind of applicable, isn't it? Well, thank you so much for your time. Welcome. Today. It's been fascinating, and when I get up to Nottingham Way, I'll let you know, and we can.
Yes, I'll take you on a personal tour of the Abbey.
Thank you. Well, I also want to do the workhouse at. Is it pronounced Southwell, Southwell, or Southwell?
Well,
Southwell.
If you're posh, it's pronounced Southwell. If you live there, it's pronounced Southwell.
Well, see, I was told to pronounce it Southwell, and then you were pronouncing it different. I was thinking, oh dear, was I pronouncing it wrong? It's because I really want to go to the workhouse there, being a bit of a workhouse buff.
It's tremendous. Really is. It's a lovely place to visit.
So I have told the husband we need to do a weekend in that part of the world.
Do you know, I am really, really lucky because I live in the middle of Sherwood Forest, and where I live, I've got Rufford Abbey, I have Clumber Park, we've got Newstead, I've got Thoresby Hall. They are all within, even things like Welbeck Abbey's just down the road. Everything
Wollerton's not too far either, is it?
Wollerton's just over the other side. Everything is really like a stone's throw from where I live in this part of the country, and that's why I love it so much. It's always been my home, and it always will be.
Well, I tell you what, have you got a garden, Barry?
I have.
Can it take a tent?
You can stay in the spare room.
Oh, thank you.
Bless you.
Yeah, you don't want my kids with you. They can go in the tent in the garden.
All right,
me.
yeah, we'll put the tent up then.
Trust me, they can go in the tent. Well, if anyone wants to find out what you're up to, your website or your Facebook page are the best bets.
Have a look on our website, www.barriejohn.com. There's loads of demonstrations coming up. There's more ghost hunts going in at the moment. I work all over the country, so anywhere from Wales to Norfolk at the moment, all the way up and down the country as well. So to go through all the list of demonstrations, we'd be here forever and a day. But there's always plenty on, and there really is, honestly. I mean, even things down to private seances that I do for people, private group tuition, you name it. And we do as much as we can because we believe so much in what we do.
Yeah, there's a passion for it.
Massively.
Well, that's awesome. Thank you so much, Barry. I really appreciate your time.
You too.
So that's been Barrie John. If you want to catch up with him, we will post his Facebook link on his website on the Parasearch page a bit later so that you can click on that. Do get in touch with him. As you can tell, he is as lovely and warm to talk to all the time. Very, very easy chap to talk to, and I'm sure you'd enjoy whether it's going on a tour of Newstead Abbey with him or going to one of his events. Well, on that note, that's been Haunted Histories on Parasearch Radio. Don't forget, we have shows on 5 nights of the week. If you miss one, fret ye not. You can catch it on Spreaker and on YouTube at any time and listen to it for your heart's content, really. So, I'm going to wish you all a very, warm Wednesday, and I do hope you sleep tight and not worry too much about things that go bump in the night.
Thank you for listening. Don't forget to join us for more shows throughout the week. Find us on Facebook, Twitter, and the World Wide Web to keep up to date with all the shows right here on Parasearch Radio.